Thank you for joining me, Lauren. And for those who don't know, Lauren Darlington, she is online as a business coach, a strategy mentor. She is a beautiful mum of one, and just a boss lady in general. I've been following you probably since I met you at the weirdest retreat that we won't go into, but it was the weirdest retreat of my life. And I felt so drawn to your story even then that I hopped online as soon as we got home. And I was like, I need to know more about this lady and like what she's doing. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a beautiful introduction. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. I guess to start with, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Amazing. So, as you said, I'm a business coach and strategy mentor. So, I've started in the online space. Oh, it feels like a lifetime ago, but I want to say full time, meaning I've not worked a proper job for 4 years now. And yeah, really started in the online space, learning about business by working in other businesses as a virtual assistant and OBM. And always knew I wanted to have my own thing, and always knew that I wanted to create something for myself and, have my own business. And just I know so many of my clients can relate to, just never really fully landed on the thing and was like, what's my thing? I didn't wake up being like, I'm going to be this. It was like, what am I going to be? Yeah. And went on the journey of discovering what I wasn't, to realize, well, okay, this is actually what I am. And then 2 years ago, 3 years ago, fell pregnant. 2 years ago, had my baby girl. And yeah, I just remember when I was pregnant and then when I gave birth, just feeling so grateful that I'd done all the exploration and all the work prior to build a business. So that way, yeah, when I was pregnant and I was becoming a mom, I was able to actually still be at home. And there wasn't this let me find what my thing is while also finding myself in motherhood. And I know for a lot of women, that is kind of the exploration, because it's we become mums and then we're like, I want to stay home with our kids. So that becomes the catalyst for it. And yeah, I just remember thinking, I'm so glad that I'd been so willing to do what was needed to build a business back then. But yeah, so business coach, strategy mentor. I am a mum to a beautiful 2-and-a-bit-year-old baby girl called Ivy. Solo mum, so navigating the mum life, the solo mum life, the business life all at once. Yeah, and just really a woman who just really loves, and this is where business started for me, really actually just loves sharing my life and sharing myself, sharing my insights, sharing all the pieces with the world. That's where I really started, was there's just, I think, something to be said for sharing my life with others.
Yeah, so good. I guess I know you said that you wanted to, once you became a mum, you're so appreciative that you started, this platform that you could really, you're in control of your life here, working on your own terms. How did you get started stepping out on your own?
Yeah, great question. So my journey was probably back in, I don't know, 2015, I'm going to say around there. And it was really sharing, like I said, sharing online. I have quite I've got a background, I've got a past, I've got a story, and it was quite tumultuous and dark and deep at times. And the way I used to, I want to say a big part of my healing was actually sharing my journey online and writing and really just sharing. And I used my social media platform when, all my friends used it for we're going out, we're going clubbing or whatever. And that's what they were doing. For me, social media was where I would share myself and share my story and share what I was going through. And, I'd write blog posts and wrote a book and all these things. And so for me, the journey started by actually just following what was alive for me at the time, which was just to share. And then I reached this point where I really turned my life around. I'd, been through therapy and all the things, and nothing was working. And a friend of mine was a coach, and I did a session with her, and it something shifted. I was like, oh, there's something about this coaching space. This actually worked. And I did a lot of work with her, and it led me on the path of oh, actually, maybe I want to be a coach. Maybe I want to be an empowerment coach. And that's where I started. I was like, okay, let me turn this platform that I've already been using and I've already been sharing myself into something that can then actually support people. Because I was in the experience of so many people like, you're so inspiring, your story is so incredible. And I'm like, that's great. But I could feel that burning desire that there's something more. I'm like, oh, there's something here. And I remember thinking like, back then, I remember thinking like all of what I've been through and I've seen and I've healed and I've discovered, it's got to be for something bigger than just, oh, look, I've done it. Yeah. And I got into coaching and thought that that's where I would go, and just started to offer, like I created a program and just started to offer things online, and just, it was just like that little shift. And this is what I see for clients that are really stuck in like, you're so inspiring, but no one's then wanting to work with them. And sometimes it's just the little shift in the messaging of like, instead of it being like all about me, it was like, this is what I've done for myself, which is why I can then walk you on this journey. So yeah, I just started offering things and went on the path that I see a lot of coaches do, where it was like, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to go all in, it's going to work. And then I'd be like, it didn't work, let me go back to the job. So I kind of went in and out, oh God, more times than I can count. And then I was working with a coach at a time, and I was just like, how I used to play this game of how can I have things happen? And I still play it now. And I was wanting to work with her more, but I wasn't in a position where I was wanting to financially invest more. And I was like, what can I do for you in exchange for coaching? Like, can I do something? She was like, well, you can edit some videos. I'm like, okay, cool. So it started there. And what she realized when I was working for it is that she's like, you're really good at supporting me in my business. Like, and she had this big, huge team. And she's like, but with you, I feel like you've really got me. She's like, there's something in that for you. And I was like, all right, let me see who else needs. And I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. Like, I didn't know how to edit videos. I didn't know how to build landing page. I didn't know how to do any of the stuff that she was getting me to do, but I was so willing to figure it out. And I was so willing to be like, okay, there's something here that I could potentially create. And yeah, I just put a post out on Facebook, and because I'd built so much, trust in the online space, because I've been showing up for so long, at the time I put a post on Facebook and ended up getting an influx of people, and suddenly overnight had created a virtual assistant business, which replaced my job. So I'd left, I think it was like 48 hours, and I quit. And all the time I knew that there was going to be something more, because like I said, I still thought it was going to be coaching or it was going to be something bigger. But I just followed, I call them bolts, because they're like lightning bolts of energy when we get ideas. And I just followed it, and I was like, there's something here. And that was the last time that I worked for like a normal job, and it just kind of evolved from there. And I realized where I am now, it was like the empowerment side and that side that I thought I was going to go down, that still comes into what I do, but for me now, it's like, what I really got over the years is, for me, the thing that lights me up the most is women actually getting their own creative potential, like their own capacity to build wealth, their own capacity to create business, their own capacity to create income. And that same spark that I started with of like, how can I have this happen? How can I create a business? Like, what's the way? Like that, building that within myself, which was built, it wasn't something I was born with. Like, it's that I want other women to experience, because I truly believe when, as women, and especially as mums, like I've been initiated into this so much deeper being a mum, I truly believe when we know how to make money, like it's like there's just so much choice and freedom and power that we then have,
Yeah, absolutely. And like, even when you're talking, I've got like full goosebumps, because I think we're still conditioned somewhat as women to lean on other people for money. And there's been times where you've posted just like little tidbits, and it's just been a kick up the ass. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm the only one that can make this successful. Like, I need to get on and do those boring jobs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Which is just so amazing. And I know that you are definitely incorporating energetics into your work and what you do. Can you talk a little bit about how the energy of the way we do things affects the outcome? Because I think a lot of people don't know anything about this, including me. Still learning.
I love this question. There's so many places I could go. I've been on such an exploration lately, even deeper, of like, what energetics really means to me, and how it looks, and how to bring it in. So I love this question. So I feel like for me, and the way that I see it is like, we can be doing the same thing and we can have a completely different energy behind it, which is, of course, is then going to, you know, dictate the outcome that's then going to come on the other side. And for some reason, what's coming to mind is like, I even see this with like, I have this thing and this, I want to say commitment and devotion to finding magic in the mundane. And it's like, there can be one task of like, I'll use the example of when I moved into the house I'm in right now. Every single night I'd vacuum and clean up after my daughter. And the most mundane task. Now I could approach that with the energy of like, oh my God, I have to clean up. Oh my God, I'm by myself. Oh my God, this is so much. Oh my God, I'm exhausted. Oh my God. And I've experienced that before where it's like, and I get the end of the day and I'm so depleted and I'm like, oh my God, now I have to clean up. This is so hard. Why is no one else here to help? Like that kind of energy behind it, right? However, there was something about when I moved and I made the decision to like, I'm going to thrive as a solo mom, that the energy I started to bring behind cleaning up at the end of the day was the most like joyful, expansive, abundant, like, oh, I'm in my own house. I get to clean up after my daughter. I get to like have a beautiful, tidy home. And it's the same task, but the energy that I brought behind it completely shifted. I no longer finish the day feeling exhausted. And I no longer go, oh God, now I have to get up and clean. Like and I was only reflecting on this week, how I feel at the end of my day is so incredibly different. And I'm doing the same thing, but I've got so much more energy. So it's such a simple thing, but it's like the energy that we bring behind something really matters. And it matters for so many reasons, because it matters like, and then how the outcome is then, and I'll talk about that in business in a moment, but it also matters for our own experience in it. You know, like the same thing can be experienced in completely different ways. And, you know, when I look at this in business and the energy behind it, like if we look at, for example, like a good one is when we're looking at like, quote unquote, getting clients. And, you know, I'll talk to clients, for example, and they'll be like, oh, you know, I'm like, and you can just feel the energy of the conversation that they're talking about having with someone, which is very much like, I've got to get this client, I've got to say the right thing, I've got to sign it, I've got to make it work. And it's very like clutchy and restrictive and like almost like it's very scarcity. It's very like riddled and looped and cased in scarcity, versus being like, how can I be of so much service? How can I come from a space of like, that what I'm doing is of such service, that I'm so magnetic, that I have so much value to give, that it's just like, and of course that this client's going to come through. And also, instead of like, how can I get the client? It's like, how can I just be of so much service that they're like, oh my God, of course they're my next step. And it's that slight shift, and like that slight shift in energy, like especially these days. And oh my God, especially as women, we're so intuitive. Like, even if you don't identify as a spiritual woman or as intuitive, like you can feel when something doesn't feel right, and you can feel when it's off, you know? And I think especially in business, we've seen this so much where people are just like, oh, like the old marketing tactics, they just don't work anymore because we feel it. You know, so it's just like, and even like you said before around like, you know, the boring things in business, like even those things, like we can shift our energy around how we're approaching it, of like, okay, cool, like, you know, there's things I do in my business that I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do this is so boring, or like, oh God, do I really have to do that thing? But it's like when we can see it from a space of like, I get to do this because of what this is moving me towards, or I get to do this because of what this is building towards, like the energy behind it just shifts everything, you know?
Amazing. And I'm totally sitting here like, I've done all those things. Like I'm that person on the phone, like, I can help you, baby, like, please, like I can help you. But I think anytime I've stepped back and been like to the client, just sort of, you know, I can do this by the XYZ, they've been able to make the choice themselves. Whereas when I've gotten too salesy, I think women are so tuned in, like they know when you're pushing too hard. And I think, there's so much to be said about women in business, and our approach is completely different to like my dad was in sales, my stepdad was in sales, and he's like a hard salesman. Like he's that guy that you would go to and he'd have you sign the dotted line on the day. Like he's good, but he's very masculine. So it's I love that you're talking about women having that more intuitive approach to the way we approach our sales and our clients, which is amazing.
And the visual that I get is like, just to add in, is it's almost like it's more of a lean back energy. And that's not to say we just sit here and are like, oh, I'm just going to wait. Like it's so not the case, but it's like the energy behind it gets to be one of like as women, we are so magnetic, and we're so magnetic when we're actually operating as women, which the feminine is like receiving, right? So it's like even, and this is where, and I talk about this a lot with clients, because they can be like, yeah, but I need money. And it's like, and this is where like, I truly believe that we can be in an experience of, I need money, but also I can energetically be leaning back and allowing. And this is where I'm always that coach as well. That's like, look, if you need to be doing a side job, or if you, I mean, look at me, I, was editing videos to create something. Like, if you need to do side things while you build up your main thing, I'm such an advocate for it, because I feel like that allows you to really be able to lean back while you're building up your main thing, So just wanted to add that in.
Amazing. Yes. Thank you. I guess like you're a mum to a beautiful little girl. What has been the main shift for you within your business since becoming a mum? So you're a business lady before you're a mum, you're now a mum, and you're a mum to a very spicy little toddler. Like I have spicy toddlers too. I know all about it. What has shifted for you in your day-to-day business?
I love these questions. Okay, what has shifted for me? I feel like I'm just going to riff, because there's a couple of pieces. One of the main things, I've always been efficient, like always been efficient, always been great with organization. But I laugh now at what I thought was efficient, because now I'm like, and you get, as a mum, you're like, the amount of things that get done in the same amount of time, I don't actually understand how it happens, but it happens. So I think one of the biggest shifts was, and I'm actually in a position at the moment where I'm going to be relocating where I am. So I'm actually going to have less support with my daughter, and I'll be more by myself. And I was talking about it with my mum this morning, and she's like, how are you going to go in business? And I'm like, well, one thing that I've noticed is things, and I've known this, and this is just, a law, it's a thing. It's like things take the amount of, I'm totally butchering it, but things take the amount of space that we give them to. So I know for me, if I have support 4 days a week, what I need to do in business will take, 4 days. Whereas if I've only got 2 or 3 days, I know that whatever I need to get done will get done, because of what's been, it's almost like what I find for me since becoming a mum is there's just such a new level of discernment around what's important and what's not, and where I need to focus and where not to. And I actually trust myself more in business than ever before, because I almost don't have space to not. Does that make sense? It's almost like, because there's so much less space, it's like I can't actually sit here and overthink things because I don't have space to do it, which is so cool and such a gift. So I feel like I definitely initiated and activated like a drive in a whole new way. And I know I'm not alone in this, to make even more wealth, and to really, like, I want to say step up what I was actually creating. And I wrote a post on this like last week or something, because I'm definitely the mum that openly speaks about that. Still having moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm a mum. And I'll have moments where I'm still like, I'll never not be a mum again. And I feel the bigness of that,
Yeah.
And I let myself explore it the other day. And then I landed in this place of like, but what's the point otherwise? Like, if I wasn't a mum, then what's the point? So I feel like it really just like birthed this whole new level of purpose and reason. And yeah, I feel like the way that I work changed. Like, I talk about this from a space of how I operate as a mom and how I operate in life and business is actually just meeting everything that comes up in every moment. And my ex reflected to me once, she's like, you don't juggle. And I was like, no, I actually don't. She's like, because it doesn't feel like you're juggling and you're flicking. And I was like, no, actually, I'm just present. It's like, Ivy will need me. Let me be with that. Something will happen in business. Let me be with that. There's something happening in my life. Let me be with that. And when I really like saw that and was like, oh, it's actually just the capacity, which has been birthed through motherhood and then it's again through becoming a solo mum and kind of having no choice. It was like every single moment when something arises, can I actually just be with what it is? They're like, okay, cool. What's here? What do I need? And then move on to the next moment. And that fluidity I never had before. Like, I was very like, it's work time. No one talked to, like, I was very structured and rigid and, becoming a mum, especially of a spicy toddler, you can't be that rigid anymore.
No, you can't. Like, that is a one-track way to have like the worst day ever. Is just like button down on one thing and not be flexible, right? I guess do you find that that helps you find balance, that ability to like compartmentalize almost like, okay, this is my Ivy time, like she needs me right now. Okay, she's good now. I'm going to get dinner ready and whatever, you know. Do you find that that helps you balance it out?
Yeah, and I feel like for me, like I think balance is such an interesting exploration, because it's kind of like there's always going to be something that's kind of like teetered. And I think for like on a seesaw, it's always like there's always going to be something that's kind of like requiring more. And I think for me, it's been that 100%, and also being willing to drop things. You know, it's like, can I be okay with I spoke about this with the client, like, because she was like, you know, I try to make all these meals with all these superfoods and da. And I'm like, can I be okay with my daughter eating healthy, but potentially not eating all raw, unprocessed, organic, like what, you know, the real extremes that we can go
Yeah.
to as moms, like, it's got to be all of this. Like, can I actually be okay with her, you know, being, going to like, I don't know, watching a little bit of extra TV that I probably would prefer that she didn't, but I just need 10 minutes by myself. Like, can I be okay with the house being messy? Like being willing to drop things and actually not guilt and shame myself. Like, I feel like, and this is something I've reflected on a lot of my journey as a mom, like for so long early on, I felt like I was such a like quote unquote different mom, because, you know, initially when her dad and I separated, we had 50-50, and it was like I'd have a whole week without her. And for me, there wasn't this like, of course I missed her and I wanted to be with her, but there wasn't this like, it's not like I couldn't then go and travel. Whereas I know for some mums, like the idea of being away from their children, they couldn't do it. And I used to question myself and be like, is there something wrong with me as a mum? And it was a beautiful journey, because it had me land in how much I get to trust my own mothering and my own self. And, you know, now I obviously have her full times. And now sometimes like when she's at her dad's for the weekend, I'm like, how's it been 48 hours? It feels like it's been like 3 weeks. Like it feels so long.
Yeah.
But I think the other piece of me that has me kind of like, quote unquote, do it all, hold it all, be it all, is being willing to also not do it all, be it all, hold it all, and get
Oof.
support.
Yes, love that. Yes, because I think we often feel like we have to do it all, like all of it, all of the things. It's just not possible. Hey.
It's not. And like the same way that I meet each moment with like what's here, it's like what's here and what do I need to thrive? And that looks like I have, you know, my mum's an incredible support, you know, like it's like, and I've always said, like, if it wasn't my mom, and, you know, one day I hope to be interstate and it won't be family. So it's like, okay, in that situation right now, my focus is like building up the wealth. So it's like, there's a nanny, like, it's always like, in those moments, how can I thrive? And that means getting support. We were never meant to do this alone, ever.
Yes, amazing. So good. I guess on the topic of spiciness, you know, I think I'll get into it and I'll ask you a few questions, but how do you deal with Ivy? Say she's having a big emotion day.
Yeah.
And you have competing demands, all those sorts of things. How do you deal with trying to regulate her yourself, get the things done? Because I think that's something I've struggled with as a mom, and most of us do, is right when you need to do something, your toddler's melting down.
Yeah, totally. I love it. I call them big feelings. So we have plenty of big feelings, especially at this age. It's almost like the 2.5, because she'd be close to 2.5. Like they're like amplifying. I'm like, okay, we're here. And it's been really beautiful to witness, because my mum is, you know, my mum helps when I'm working. So it's been beautiful just to witness her response based on, you know, our parents so differently, versus my response. And, you know, she always reflects, she's like, you are so patient. Like, I never identify, like, I'm not a patient human. Like, I want that thing done yesterday. And when I look at it, and to answer your question, for me, it's like how it tangibly looks is when she's having big feelings, is I just get on the floor next to her and I sit with her and I'm like, okay. And I just, again, I'm going to say I need it. And for me, I know in the moment that while I'm sitting there with her, my number one priority is to regulate myself. So for me, that's as simple as like taking deep breaths. I'll stroke my arms, because I know that instantly soothes me. Like things that I've learned that I can do on the go like that. And they're so simple and they're so like, but they just work. And my priority in that moment, regardless of like there's another demand or there's this or that, is actually just to regulate myself and her simultaneously, because I know that once that happens, then the other thing will still be there. And what I've realized is anytime I'm trying to, and I noticed this, it was last week, I had a call I was meant to be on, it was dinner time, she had really big feelings and I was feeling dysregulated as a result. And I was standing in the kitchen and I was like trying to listen to this call, like this training I was meant to be on. The stove was on and she was like completely falling apart on the floor. And I was like, okay. So in that moment, I was like, great, turn the dinner off, mute the training. It can still be on because I was just listening up. And I was like, my priority right now is actually to just sit on the floor with her and regulate. And what I realized is because I was getting more dysregulated and frustrated because I was like, I'm trying to be on this training. I'm trying to cook dinner. Why won't she stop? It was just amplifying the situation. So it's almost like in those moments, I literally just drop everything. And I'm like, let me just meet here and be here. And what I found, I want to say 9.5 times out of 10 is that when I actually just meet her in that, it does then subside. It's actually what I've found in my own mothering. And I say that with, 1-2-year-old. So ask me again when I've got multiple. But what I've found is like, it's the resistance to actually being willing to be in the moment and just be like, can I actually just be here and support her? That actually amplifies it. And then once she de-escalates, and sometimes it will be things like taking her outside or like shifting the space as well, because I find that it can amplify if she's in this, like if she's in the same space that she's been having the experience in. And then for me, it's like once that's de-escalated, I then just like ground back into myself. And again, it's simple things that I've learned because I've had to, of like, I'll close my eyes, I'll feel the soles of my feet, like I'll just pull myself back in. And then I'm like, okay, dinner back on, training back on, And I think it's the little things like that in the moments. And then also being willing for there potentially sometimes to be things that get dropped, like I've had to get off a training call. I've had to, not finish dinner, but it's like, can we be willing to be with that? Because I honestly feel like it's the resistance that just amplifies everything and just makes it harder.
Absolutely. And like my daughter Rubes, so she still is, she's everything that I wish I could express. She just expresses it on the spot, which I love. And when she started tantruming, I was very much not on my own personal growth journey. And it was so triggering. Like just the meltdowns. I just remember being like, what the fuck is this? We don't act like this. And it was so much, but I guess hearing you, you are sort of down the track on your healing journey. Before motherhood, you started all of this, which I find so amazing, because it wasn't until motherhood that I really knew something wasn't, not that it wasn't right with me, but something needed to change in the way I approached life. You've been really vulnerable, sharing a little bit of your journey on healing. And I was wondering if you would take us through a little bit of the path that you've walked with finding Lauren.
Totally. Like, how deep do we go on this path? Because there's a few. I think for me, like the Cliff Note version, like for me, I really started healing and I really started discovering who I was. I want to say, 2015 makes, I'm not good with maths, that's 13. I want to say my early 20s. My early 20s is when I probably 22, 23 is when I really started. And it was from a space of with you, it was like motherhood and then being like, oh, something's got to change. And I don't believe we have to have a rock bottom to change, but I do see for most of us, there is kind of a rock bottom, because it's almost like that's got to be something to catapult us, because otherwise there's not a big enough drive. I believe we can be driven by oh, I want more, which is where, most of us are now. But early on, it's usually there's something that happens. And for me, my journey prior was really quite tumultuous and dark. And, and I didn't know who I was. And I had a lot of mental illness stuff. And I had a background of, self-harm and suicide attempts. And it was dark and it was heavy. And it was just this constant experience of there was just never anything more. I was just in survival, and had my own experiences growing up. And it was just there was this predictable path that my life was going down. And it started to change when I realized that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing anymore. I just couldn't. It was there were so many things, and my family were trying so much and it was just not working. And I remember I just kept reaching these points, and unfortunately I had to hit another really quite significant rock bottom for me to then go, I actually can't. And it was this moment of I was in this particular experience, and it's almost like I woke up and I was like, whoa, what am I doing with my life? What am I actually doing? And yeah, I lost my cousin at a very young age. to a similar path. And it was that moment that I was like, no more, like, I just can't, even if the only reason is because of a promise I made to her, like that has to be enough. And yeah, I started on the journey of like, okay, let me start. And back then for me, it was let me start accepting who I was, because I think it's a dangerous conversation when we talk about self-love, when, you know, there's women and humans that are like, well, I can't even fathom the conversation of self-love because of where I'm at. So for me, it was like, can I actually just accept where I'm at? Can I accept who I am? And I went on this really big journey of like, yeah, just starting to explore that and starting to explore who I was and get to know myself. And I was someone who had so much social anxiety and didn't want to be seen. And I remember, and I'll never forget it, part of me, because I'm very self-expressed now. Like I love style, I love jewelry, I'm very self-expressed, but back then I wasn't. And part of me discovering that was, and I'll never forget, it was I had short hair and I'd wear earrings and I would be so anxious and so nervous, and the internal like turmoil of like, oh my God, someone's going to notice me, because it was almost like the earrings made me stand out. And I just remember I would like put them on and go for a walk, and I would just breathe through the experience. And I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but I was just like, there's something about me getting comfortable being seen. Yeah. And I just started to play with different things, and you know, like this is very cliff notes. So this is over a period of multiple years, but started working with coaches. And yeah, it just really started to like, it's like it started with acceptance. And then it was like, okay, I now, and real exploration and being like, who actually am I outside of the labels of all of the things that I once was. And then from there was that bigger purpose that I shared earlier of like, this has got to be for something bigger than me, you know? And I feel like that's what so many of us go on. It's like, we heal for ourselves, and then we reach this point where it's like, now it's not enough and it's got to be for something bigger. Yeah. And just kept walking. And I feel like there was a certain path I was on where, like, you know, work's never done. I just like healing and all the things. And I'm really big on like, I never stop and be like, I have to heal and I have to quote unquote fix, because I feel like in self-development we can get really caught in there's more, and there's this wound and there's this shadow, and I see people loop in healing, and it's like, but what's the point if all we're doing is healing all the time? And yeah, I was kind of like on this path in healing, and then you know, get initiated into being a mom, and then I was initiated into really realizing that, oh, I didn't want to be with her dad, and oh, actually I think I'm into women, and like all of these things that I was like, okay, here we go, we're on another journey. Yeah. And I'd actually say, like, with all of that, like for me this year feels like it's been the hardest and yet the greatest year simultaneously, because it's like the layers of healing that I've done and all of the work and the pieces, and you know, even after becoming a mom. And then this year, it's just like been initiated into like the deeper, it's almost like for me, this year's felt like the deeper becoming of a woman. And in that, there's been so many deaths and so many identity shifts and so much of the deeper stuff that just didn't feel safe enough to come up earlier. But I just think on our healing journey, like it's really important to remember that, you know, they both get to coexist. Like we live in a dualistic universe. Like, yes, we're going to have the depths, and yes, there's going to be the pain, but it's like also there's like, I find so much beauty in that, you know, and to just remember that there's got to be a bigger reason that we're doing it all for. Otherwise we'll just get stuck in healing. It's like we weren't put here just to keep healing and digging and looking for stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's got to be about pleasure and enjoying life too, right? And I think mums, I mean, I remember, so, you know, you spoke about 2 rock bottoms. I was exactly the same. I hit a rock bottom at 21 and I chose to just get on with life, you know, and then after I had my son, big Mack truck hit me, and that was like, okay, yeah, this ain't working. Let's do something. But one of the things I've learned is how much my body resists going to have fun.
Yeah, right.
You know, and yeah, that's amazing. Like absolutely you can fall into the healing loop, but I'm working with a really beautiful coach, Laura Corcoran, as well, and she's such a pain in the ass, but I love her with like have you gotten into pleasure, like have you danced, had you had fun? Because as women and as mums especially, like we need that in our day. It's not meant to be all stress, 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 go, go, go. And one thing that I would say about you, and you But like, it's funny, these conversations that we had, you mentioned to me, you know, I can't remember what you said. It was something about your mum.
Yeah.
And, you know, you'd revealed a little bit of your past and that you'd had a bit of a tumultuous relationship with her.
Yeah.
And then you said she was at the birth of Ivy.
Yeah.
And I'm navigating some big mum stuff, and I'm starting to see another side of it now where I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready to let my mum back in my life. But yeah, the fact that you have navigated that so beautifully, and she's downstairs right now with your daughter. What, I guess, has motherhood brought up for you in seeing how your parents raised you and how you're going to raise Ivy? Like, how do you navigate that? Because there are things that come up, and we notice the differences between our childhood and how we want to raise our kids.
Totally. I love this. And I'm like emotional. Yeah, I think, and I'm so glad you brought this up. I think for me, like, I'll have moments where I'm still just like hit with the bigness of the actual generational healing that has taken place. And I think, yeah, and it still sometimes like blows my mind, and it's the most beautiful thing. And I think the biggest thing, and then I'll answer around the parenting piece, but I think the biggest thing for me that it's been affirming, and I share this for anyone who, and again, like, whether we choose to have our parents in our life or not, everyone's journey is completely different. And I know for me, like, a lot of people didn't and still don't understand it, you know, they're like, how? But for me, it came down to like, now when I look at the relationship that I have with her, and like, my mum in my life is like the unshakable person in my family. And that was never my experience of her, like, ever. Like, my mum was so not there at all. Like, I was the mum when I was younger. Like, so to see that, and then to see her relationship with Ivy, and to feel how supported I get to be, I'm always reminded of like, this wouldn't have been possible if I was so willing to clutch on to what had happened that I wasn't willing to see her any different. And one of the biggest shifts that happened was me realizing that I can either choose to stay angry and keep seeing her as, this is who she is, this is who she is, this is who she is, or I can choose to actually be willing to start to see her in a different way. It's amazing what happens when we're willing to do that. And it's got to be two people, you know. Like, for me, I did my own healing, and then my mum did her own healing on her own accord. And because of that, we've been able to create what we have. And, you know, I know even if she didn't do the healing, even by me being willing to let go of what I was so, like, I had to reach a point where I was willing to drop the old story that I was clutching to, because I could be right about that forever. And I was like, do I want to be right? Or do I want to actually experience love in this lifetime and look back on my life and not have the regret of what if? You know? So for me, when I look at, yeah, and it's been an interesting dynamic with the seeing how she parents and seeing how I parent and all the things, especially because, like, she is very actively in Ivy's life. And I know for me, it was being really clear and really trusting how I parent and always communicating that with her. So I'm able to meet mum and be like, this is what, you know, for example, I don't say good girl because I feel like we have to undo the conditioning as we get older. So ever since she was born, I was like, it's good job, but we don't good girl all over her. And I remember I had the conversation with my mom, and I was like, because she kept saying it, and mom's like, you never told me not to. And I was like, oh no, sorry, I told everybody else, I forgot to tell you. And so now she just won't say good girl. Like, so there's things that I'll see her do that I'm able to like just see and be like, oh, that's what she learned. Like, even, you know, how she responds when Ivy's got big feelings, I can feel the energy of it compared to how I feel. And it's not super calm and grounded and patient all the time, which we're human, but I'm able to look at and be like, okay, I know that my mum did the best that she could. And I truly believe that. I truly believe our parents do the best that they can with what they have at the time, because through conversation with my mom, like, she's like, we just didn't have the awareness that you guys have. Like, she's like, we just didn't know these things. Like, I know for me and my family, like, the women in my family did not talk about things. I came in and started talking about everything and completely disrupted the whole family. And they're like, shit, what do we do with her? Because it's like, up until then, you just don't talk about things. You just shove everything under the carpet. And so there was no conversation around, like, if you're struggling as a mom, or what do you do here? Like, it was just a strict way. And I can see that. And it's almost like I can see that and have compassion and be like, you did the best that you could. And There's things that worked and there's a lot of things that didn't. And it shaped me differently than I thought, because before becoming a mum, I grew up when I was a very resentful and angry teenager. And I used to say, I'll never have my mum in my life. And I told her she'll never be in my life. She won't be at my wedding. She won't be around my kids. And 2, I will never be who she is. And that was like, I was just so like, I'm not going to be you. And I remember when I became a mum, part of the healing of becoming a mum was also being willing to accept the parts of me that were potentially exactly the same as her.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah. And the parts of me that, and I'll never forget when I decided to leave my daughter's father and realized that I could stay in this fairy tale, this beautiful white picket fence life we were talking about. You know, I always wanted to stay with the same person because I came from a separated family. And I remember feeling, but I want more. And this is not enough. And there's something in me. And realizing that, oh, actually, I really desire to be with a woman and all of these pieces. And I'll never forget. And I said to my mom, I was like, I get it. You know, my mum hit 30 and, you know, now what I know about like Saturn returns, I was like, oh, you're in your Saturn return, mum. My mum hit 30 and completely went wild and partied and went to drugs. And that's when everything, she was a good mum, hit 30 and everything fell apart. And I never got it. And when I felt that and chose to leave my daughter's father, I said to my mom, I was crying. I looked at her, I was like, I actually get it. I get why you did what you did. You know, because it's like you weren't in a position where you realized what was actually going on and you were able to choose different, and you realized that. And instead of actually making a new decision, you know, you went down that path. And I realized it because I was like, holy shit, if I don't leave my daughter's father, I can see how I could go down that. And not in the same as in I turned to drugs and stuff, but I could see how I was unhappy underneath. And if I didn't have the awareness to look at it, and if I didn't know myself to know and feel the signs, I can see how I could have gone down a path that could have been my own version of that. I think that moment of being so willing to just meet her as a human and be like, you know what? It's fucking hard being a mum and I get it. Do I agree with what happened? No. But I get it. And yeah, I just think that willingness to be almost like that humble, to just be like, as a human, like, I get it. And again, for anyone listening, that does not mean we bypass or we forgive. Like, it's a whole other conversation. Like, just in the context of my situation with my mom, like there was so much healing and all of the stuff, but I think the biggest thing that it shaped me in as a mom was like, instead of parenting from a space of I'll never be that, it was accepting like the parts of me that, okay, I am that, but what do I choose with this new awareness? What do I choose based on how I was brought up? What do I choose based on what I desire to be? Because just like the energy that we spoke about before, if I'm mothering from a space of almost like resentment and retaliation, like that's the energy that's going to come through my mothering versus coming from a space of like really fucking accepting and choosing, you know?
Oh,
Has that answered your question? I went on a riff.
No, that was so beautiful. And I think like, God, I needed to hear it. I so needed to hear it. It's just, I just find it so inspiring and so amazing, because very similar, I guess, your early journey is where I'm at with my mom, and we're slowly reconnecting, and I'm seeing where I just took a massive step back and did my own stuff. And behind the scenes, I had no idea she's been doing it. You know, and it's slowly, and I'm like, this is my third baby, my third birth, and I'm like, this feels like a rebirth, you know, this new dynamic that we're navigating now, which is awkward and beautiful and all these things. But I just think a lot of mums, when we have a baby, if we haven't dealt with this stuff, you know, it can come out as postnatal depression or anxiety and, you know, those labels. And that's certainly what happened for me. But we don't really understand why we're angry or why we're sad, or, you know, there's all these things that happen after we have a baby. And I think it's so helpful to sometimes just hear from someone that's a bit further down the track and be like, okay, like you can land in a really beautiful space of self-compassion, self-love, you know, understanding, because there's definitely moments, even 2 nights ago, I was praying and I was just like, I'm ready to forgive, you know, and I just, ooh,
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
Well, that got deep real quick. Thank you so much. I guess as well, one thing I've noticed with your, I guess your daily practices was that you always commit to yourself. Is that something that you were doing before you had Ivy?
Yeah, so I call them daily devotions, because they're just, and again, I'm going to say the energy behind it is so much less about it's a morning routine, let me tick a box, and so much more about like, this is true. And the energy of it is like, oh, it's like yum. Like it's so devotional. It's not about what I do. It's about the approach of it. I've definitely, I don't want to say always, but like since starting like my quote unquote journey and my self-development and growth, I have been a person with morning routine. Yes. And I feel like it's amplified since becoming a mum, in the sense of there's a lot more, I brought in a lot more of the energetics. Before it was very much like, let me exercise and, I don't even know if I meditate. I don't think I meditated much. It might be exercise and journal. Whereas now there's a whole thing, and I meditate, and I do some embodiment work. Like there's a lot more beingness that comes in now. And I feel like that has been, I don't want to say, it's definitely not a coincidence. I feel like it's definitely come from a space of also knowing what's needed for me to thrive. And I definitely feel like it impacts how I mother. Like I know for certain I cannot not have a morning practice. And, you know, I will always get up before her, regardless of the amount of time that it may allow for me, because I just think I think as humans in general, we need that before we need to devote to ourselves before we give to anyone else, but especially as mums, you know, I think I can imagine that it would be so easy to like wake up to our kids needing us, and from that second that we open our eyes, like if the way we wake up is our kids come into us or we hear the monitor crying, it's like from the second we open our eyes, we're needed and we're external. And it's like, but if we're not first grounded in, we're reacting all day. It just sets the tone.
Oof,
You know?
yeah, girl. I just started cold showers. It's my one thing I do in
Oh,
the morning.
yes.
But it's so hard to stick to it. Like it is really hard when you're first getting started. What do you actually do in your routine? Like,
Yeah.
I want to be you when I grow up, Lauren. So you like lay it out for me.
I love you. Here's the step by step. No, so what I do genuinely stays the same, and I'll explain what I mean, but then sometimes I'll change things out. But at the moment, what I do is I wake up and I have my lemon water and I ice roll my face. I have one of those like rose quartz things, because like there's just something about like coldness on your face as soon as you wake up for me. And I'm that person that loves mornings. Like I'm like 5:30. Winter keeps getting me though. We keep snoozing a bit longer because it's cold. But yeah, and there's something about the house being quiet. So I'll put like a lamp on, and it's just the most beautiful slow start. And then I will potentially do some journaling, or sometimes I'll just go straight into a silent meditation. So I do 20 minutes of meditating. Anyone who doesn't meditate, 20 minutes sounds like a lifetime. I used to get to like 2 minutes and be struggling. So it's just like an incremental thing to increase. I'll meditate. I'll either like drop in just like with my like spiritual team, or like I've got an altar and I'll just like sit at my altar and I'll just drop in. I'll do some embodiment practices, which for me is normally just like I'll play some songs and I'll just intuitively feel into my body and feel how my body wants to move. Because I feel my journey has been of actually coming home to my body and that being safety and building such a beautiful relationship there. So that's a really big, important practice for me. And then I'll do a 10-15 minute workout on YouTube. There's an incredible woman called Pamela Reif. There's like 10 minutes and it's literally all I do, because I'm like, I used to be a gym junkie and now I'm like, one, I can't go to the gym. My daughter's in bed and I have like a setup downstairs, but I'm like, I don't want to spend hours working out. So do a quick workout. Then I actually have a sauna, which was part of my, how do I thrive as a solo mom? I'm like, I want a sauna in my house. So I have a sauna in my garage. So I'll have a sauna, and in the sauna, I'll read out like my vision script. I'll do some gratitudes, and I'll also just like play with different processes, but I do a process where I call it like energizing my business or energizing my desires. And I'll just really like feel what I'm creating next and really just like play with the energy of it and just and energize it and allow it to like feel how it feels in my body and allow it to expand. So just processes of like manifesting in different ways. And then I will have a cold shower, and I'm really big on habit stacking. So while I have a shower, I'll have like a, you know, wealth reprogramming or something playing while I'm getting ready, because I'm like, we just are doing the thing anyway. So what I went through a stage, which I've kept forgetting to, but I went through a stage of like doing Kegel exercises while doing my makeup because I always forget to do them. So anything that I can stack, I'm like, let's just stack things together.
Oh, I love that.
But that's my morning.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like we have like ping ponged on a million different topics, but it's all been so juicy and delicious. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, is Instagram the best way?
Yes. So I'm always over on Instagram at Lauren.Darlington. And say hi if you do.
Yes, you are amazing. And even if it's just to log in and get some practical tips and, you know, follow you, you give so much juicy, delicious goodness on there. And I love it. I'm so here for it. But thank you so much for joining me. You are incredible. Yeah, thanks so much.